Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your time. My name's Katie Earle. I'm the coordinator of the University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. We're joined here virtually today with Josh Wilson and Tracy Skalski from the Department of Environment and Planning. And we're really thankful for them and sharing their time with us. So we are recording this. If you have to hop off or if there's someone you know that missed it, please let them know that it should be on our website in the near future. And if you have any questions or comments throughout their presentation, don't hesitate to type that in the Q&A panel. It looks like you've all been on with me before, so I won't bore you with how to access that because I hope you know. But if you have any questions, just type those in as soon as you think of them. And we'll also be putting up a poll. So once I release that, when I get the go-ahead from Tracy or Josh, that'll pop right up on your screen. So we hope you participate. And as always, I want to thank the sponsors of our University Express program, my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for everything they do to make this program possible. And Senior Services is here. If you have questions about programs, services, benefits, really anything, please just give us a call. We're happy to help however we can. We're 858-8526. Now I will introduce our speakers. Tracy is the Sustainability Coordinator in the Erie County Department of Environment and Planning. She has a bachelor's degree in Environmental Earth Science from Buffalo State College, and Tracy has 15 years of professional experience in the environmental field, and since 2015, she has concentrated on environmental sustainability and climate change. That's what Tracy looks like. There we go. All right. And then we have Josh Wilson with us, and he has a bachelor's degree in chemistry and biology from Earlham College. He has 19 years of professional experience working on energy efficiency and climate change, and he has worked for Erie County since 2016 in this department. So thank you both for being here. I will turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Katie, and thanks everybody for joining us today. You know, we're excited to get a chance to talk to you. We're very excited that you're interested in this topic. It's very important to us. It's I think really important to our community. So just to tell you, you know, I'm from the school of thought where you tell people what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, then you tell them what you told them. So you know, our agenda today, we're going to start off by giving some background around just a high level what climate change is to Erie County and what our approach is to mitigating it. Then we're going to do a little bit of discussion about two areas about how we see the community overall reducing emissions. And one is how the county can reduce its operational emissions. So that's inside of the things we do as a county government. And then the second aspect will be how individuals can reduce their greenhouse gas. And what I'm going to do for that individual part is I'm going to lead you through a real nice, kind of simplistic, but nice tool that lets you kind of see how you as a resident, as a person in Erie County, and as a household can do some things to reduce your footprint. So with no more on that, I'm just going to just hit some slides. If this is a topic you've tracked, this is not going to be news to you, but we're really seeing unprecedented levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. If you look back into prehistory, this slide shows kind of one level, but of course prehistory goes back billions of years. We're way beyond the emission levels that have been seen since pretty much since dinosaurs roamed the earth. And we're seeing actual nuts and bolts impacts on our environment, and also we're projecting even more severe impacts. And so this slide shows a set of different kinds of impacts. You're seeing air temperature, humidity, heat in the oceans, sea level, sea surface temperature, temperature over the oceans, temperature over land. All of these things are trending upward. And the projection is going out to the end of the century, they're going to get really high. And so that's why worldwide we have nations around the planet coming together to work on climate change. Of course, our federal administration pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord, but the new administration plans to rejoin. And the reason that there's so much global focus on this is because there's a lot we can do. It isn't that we are just heading into the abyss. There's some really concrete things we can do to really avoid the worst impacts. And those impacts are for future generations. The worst impacts aren't going to affect me in my lifetime. They're future generations. So this is really important when we look at our kids and grandkids and think about how we're going to try to make sure this planet is a safe place. So few indicators that are going down is snow cover, glaciers, and sea ice. And then threats to Erie County. We're currently working on a climate vulnerability assessment for Erie County. So this is a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation funded project. It's not a huge project. It's really kind of our first cut at this, but looking at, first off, how threats are increasing. And so we did a threat analysis and looked at the local environment, and really flooding and rain, our wind events, heat waves, and biological impacts like invasive species and vector-borne disease are the 4 threats that really stand out. Heat waves in particular, I mean, I have another slide on this. You would think that Buffalo, with its mild environment, heat waves wouldn't be a big issue. But in a lot of ways, and research has shown that for places like Buffalo that aren't used to heat waves, they have very high impact and mortality when they happen. Through today, I don't believe we've ever had a 100-degree day. This chart shows that in gray, you can see in this little inset box, start by looking at that. Through 1990, there'd never been a 100-degree day. And then the yellow and red shows under low emissions and high emission scenarios what could happen. So in the yellow emission scenario, that's if we really clamp down on emissions, we expect that we would have 300-degree days a year by 2070 to 2099. And then if we don't do anything about greenhouse gases, we're going to have 1,400-degree days a year. So for an area that rarely has a 90-degree day, to start having 1,400-degree days a year shows that we would really move into a different kind of climate in our region with really a lot of potential impacts. This is a slide. This is too busy probably to go through in too much, but there's a lot of health impacts related to this. And this all kind of rises at where we were a couple years ago, where the county executive Poloncarz signed an executive order saying that we were going to commit to the Paris climate targets as a county. So the Paris climate targets were the worldwide targets to reduce emissions by 26 to 28% versus a 2005 baseline. And so we set those as our own targets, both as a government and then also as a community. And that all was precipitated by the federal withdrawal from the Paris Accord, and a lot of local governments. We're not alone. Local governments all over the country said, we're going to stand up in the absence of federal movement on this. We're going to stand up as communities and focus on this issue. So, approach to climate change. And what you see is that we have 3 kinds of ways we think about it. Our internal operations and community mitigation are 2 ways that we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the third leg of the stool is how we're going to adapt to climate changes. Because some climate change is inevitable. So we're going to have to prepare for those floods and those heat waves no matter what. But the first 2 legs of the stool are how are we going to reduce our impacts. Today we're going to talk about our internal operations some. And then we're not going to really talk much about climate adaptation or community mitigation. Of course, then we're going to talk about your individual potentials. So the first thing we do when we talk about our internal operations greenhouse gas issues is we got to first figure out where we're at. We have to figure out what the yardstick is. And you can't measure what you can't manage what you don't measure, right? So first we have to measure what our impacts are. And what you see is that in 2000, there's a lot of information on this slide. What this really showing is that over different periods of time, what our annual greenhouse gas emissions were as a county government. That's internal operations. And what you see is that we've reduced our emissions 28%, mostly, but not entirely, because of changes to the utility grid and electricity emissions coming down. That purple bar is from electricity. And what you've seen across New York State is that coal-fired power plants have mostly become uneconomical, and there's been a wholesale change to natural gas, and that's caused a huge reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. But there have also been other things. Our transportation system has become somewhat more efficient, and we've done things like that pink slide that you see is there was a really inefficient district heating system that was mothballed, and we put in high efficiency heating, and there's other things we've done. So we conducted the greenhouse gas inventory, and then, I mentioned about the greenhouse gas mix. This is a slide that shows that, natural gas has become a bigger factor for our generating electricity. oil and coal have mostly gone away. The red bar is coal. So I'm going to hand it over to Tracy. She's going to talk to you about some of the things that county government is doing, and then we're going to switch back and talk about your individual footprint. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you, Josh. So yeah, I'm here to tell you about what we've actually done for our internal operations. I was brought on board, as Katie said, in 2015 to the county to work on this Erie County Climate Action and Sustainability Plan, specifically for our internal operations. It was through a NYSERDA grant, which is New York State Energy Research and Development. And they allowed me to take what Josh had talked about, his greenhouse gas emissions, and we came up with goals for our own county. So it was within the time that we started creating this plan that the county executive signed that executive order through the Paris Accord. So we then had to kind of switch gears, but then align with the Paris Accord to what we were already working on for our internal ops. So we started out by looking at our greenhouse gas emission baseline, and then we set our goals. So we did it over 3 different terms. We figured some of the items that we could do to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions were already started. A lot of it just wasn't really documented. It wasn't completely implemented. So we tried to take everything that was already happening and figure out, what can be done in the short term, what would take some more time, and what could, happen years from now. A lot of things you need to start planning now, and you need to start doing things now in order to make those long-term goals come to fruition. So we really wanted to lay everything out as best as we could and come up with these short, mid, and long-term goals. So aligning with the Paris Accord, we have 32% as our short-term goals by 2020. So here we are already at our short-term goals. Oh, Josh, you went forward too far. You got to go back a couple. One more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thanks. So 32%, it's funny because when you do a greenhouse gas emission inventory, you can't do it in the year you're in. So we're in 2020. We have to wait. It's almost 2 years even. It's, by the end of 2021, we should be able to have some pretty reliable 2020 data. So we won't know if we hit our short-term goals for this year, based on the fact that we set it for this year, but we have done a ton of work implementing a lot of these goals. So we're once we can see where we're at on the inventory, we'll know how well we did against our goals. So short term, 32% at 2020, and then 2025 aligns with the Paris Accord goals, and we're hoping to have 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions reduced for internal operations, and then at that 80% in the long term by 2040. Slide. So this plan we had to come up with different chapters and figure out how to separate each sector. And then, from there you figure out implementation strategies. So it's, where are our big hitters? Then what can we do within those big hitting sectors in order to come up with implementation actions to reduce the greenhouse gases? And we kind of just mimicked what we had in our greenhouse gas emissions. That was our our inventory, That's our baseline. So we know those are the sectors where we're measurable. So we took those and made them into our different chapters. Buildings and energy. We have over 220 buildings in Erie County. So across the board, we're looking at all the energy from all the different buildings. And that goes from the Raft building where many of the employees work. There's about 5,000 county employees. I would say almost 2,000 work in that Rath building alone, down to the parks, Chestnut Ridge Park, where they have buildings that you could rent, for parties and things like that. So, or the warehouses for the highway department. So the building stock is very diverse across the county. Water, which we broke up into our buildings and our sewers. So water, as you think of as restrooms and faucets and break rooms and things like that within the county buildings. And then our Department of Sewerage Management, which is a completely separate entity. But we wanted to make sure we include them because they're just such a huge part of our water impact. Waste management and recycling is exactly what it is. We had to look at what we were doing as employees with our garbage versus our recycling. And, if we were able to recycle more or encourage behavior change, maybe bringing in reusable items and things like that. Transportation was one of our biggest emissions. And we broke it down into two different sectors as well. So we had our commute as well as our general fleet. So as you know, the county has their own sets of fleets, whether it's just our general fleet, but then certain departments have their own sets of fleet as well. As you could imagine, the sheriffs, the central police, social services have a lot of their own fleet vehicles. And then our commute is just what we're doing as employees going in and out to our respective buildings for work each day. And then finally, land management, which has to do with a lot of the parks and planning and things like that. Slide. So we took each of those chapters and we had working groups where we have an Erie County Green Team, and we took the representatives that had the most expertise in those areas, and we formed working groups. So we have 5 different working groups that we work with. So this one I have up here, I'm showing just our fleet. So we have a transportation subcommittee working group that worked on these actions. And I show this one slide just as this is it's taken right out of the Climate Action and Sustainability Plan, and it shows how we took that main chapter and then we broke it down into actual implementable action items. So for our fleet action items, we were able to come up with 5 different measures on how we could reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from our county-owned vehicles. So each measure has a priority tier, and we measured the priority through those 4 additional across the greenhouse gas reductions, co-benefits, cost effectiveness, and feasibility. So we really mapped out what we thought each of these measures could do with the greenhouse gas reduction, any other benefits that came with it, how feasible it was, cost effective, how effective it was cost wise. If it was going to cost a lot, we had to bring it down some, and then feasibility. And that helped us rank out what priority our measures were. So that's just a quick example on how within the Climate Action and Sustainability Plan, we took each measure and tried to really rank it in the correct way and prioritize which actions that we could get done to make the biggest impact. Slide. Erie County is a certified bronze certified climate smart community. So the DEC, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, they have this program, which is a Climate Smart Communities program, that if you sign up and pledge to be a climate smart community, you can then submit the actions that you have taken to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. And it goes across a point system through the state. So we were able to take our actions from the Climate Action and Sustainability Plan and put them in this portal through DEC, and it gave us a point system where if you got above a certain amount, you were certified a climate smart community. And at the end of last year in 2019, we received enough points where we became a bronze certified climate smart community. So we were really excited to be able to showcase that, we are really doing a lot. We're taking the steps necessary to complete these actions. That the Climate Action and Sustainability Plan document is a live document. It's not just sitting on a shelf. We are taking action against climate change, and we're really working hard. And to become a certified community was really exciting for us. Slide. So I'm just these are really a couple quick slides just showing some of our current successes. So Erie County has done many energy conservation projects within a lot of the county buildings. This just shows some high efficiency boilers that were put in. Slide. Electric charging stations. So the county has been really working hard on electrifying their fleet and putting in infrastructure around the community to support electric vehicles. As I said, transportation is one of the highest emission sectors. So this has really been huge. And there is a map coming up that'll show you where these charging stations are. But our Department of Public Works has been working really hard to get charging stations sprinkled throughout the community so that if you do have a plug-in electric or hybrid vehicle, you could then charge up while you're at a park or at a place where we have installed these. Many are at parks right now, and many more are on the horizon. 2020 kind of stalled a little bit of the install of these, but I think we're at 9 currently completely installed charging station around Erie County, with more to come. Slide. Erie County has composting facility. So this came right out of our green team. So out of our internal ops, green team came the sheriff's idea that out at Alden Correctional Facility, we could potentially put in a composting facility. And we were able to apply for and receive a grant to construct this composting facility out at the jail, where we're able to utilize volunteer work from the inmates. So we have, a workforce that is set to work on creating this compost out of this food waste. And food waste we didn't even talk about as a huge emission factor for greenhouse gases. So this is a little bit old. The photo, the composting facility is in more operation than it shows, but all of the food waste from the Alden Correctional Facility is being put into this composting facility. So it's no longer going to landfill. It's being put here where it's going to be turned into compost, which will then be used throughout Erie County buildings. And the exciting part is that we have a new grant coming up where we're hoping to expand this, not only having the food waste from the Alden Correctional Facility turned to compost, but we're hoping to divert all the rest of the food waste from a lot of the municipal buildings that Erie County owns as well. So all of our other buildings, hopefully we'll be able to start collecting our food waste, diverting it from landfill, and getting it over to this composting facility. And I know they're in the works to get it beyond that. So they're hoping eventually to have outside municipalities food waste as well. So that's just exciting, and it's down the line, and it's just a great way to get food waste out of the landfill where it should not be. Slide. And then here's that charging station map that I put in out of order on the slide. So you can see most of these are at parks and some golf courses, but charging stations are popping up all over Erie County, and it's exciting that they will continue to pop up. This map, the Climate Action and Sustainability Plan, and all of our other sustainability programs for the county can be found on our website, which it's on a slide a couple down. So when we get to the questions, it'll be on there so you can see where you can go to find all these great resources. Slide. And then next steps, before I hand it over to Josh, or before we stop halfway and take some questions, I know Josh mentioned these last 2 legs of the stool, community climate planning and climate adaptation. So community climate planning is in full effect right now. It is actually what I'm working on next, which is our community climate action plan. And we have a community climate change task force, which has many representatives from throughout the community, including the Buffalo Museum of Science, municipalities, the city of Buffalo, transportation organizations, and as well as support from the county executive and Erie County departments, universities. There's many, many others. So we're working together to complete a community climate action plan. And that is just it's just starting off in the new year, where we'll have a lot of outreach needed for community members to weigh in on how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the community. So we're, focus is shifting from our internal ops to our community. And there's more to come on that. Slide. There's a website at the top, and I think we're ready to take some questions if we have any from the first half of the presentation.
We do have some questions, so thank you for that, and I'll go ahead and ask if that's all right. First one I'm seeing is climate vulnerability assessments. What are you looking at specifically?
Yeah, so the climate vulnerability assessment has kind of a structure where we start at a high up level and then drill into what we're going to do with it, right? And then so I call this the CD, this climate vulnerability assessment. So the first step was a hazard assessment. So the first step was, let's figure out what is the threat to Erie County specifically of climate change. And then narrowing down the threats that we're going to focus on in the latter parts of the process. And so those are the ones I put on the screen before, which were thermal vulnerability, especially heat waves, flooding and wind events, biological impacts from things like vector-borne disease, like ticks, having Lyme disease, as different kinds of vectors like ticks expand in their ranges into our area, and also invasive species and harmful algal blooms being biological threats. So those are the hazards. After we went through this process of looking at, oh, this is what we expect to happen in our region, these are the hazards we expect to see. And if you go to this web page that Tracy has on the screen, erie.gov/sustainability, you'll see a section on the climate vulnerability assessment, and you can look there at there's a video and also a report on the hazards assessment. The second step of the climate vulnerability assessment is a sensitivity assessment. So that's looking, so these are our hazards. Then the next step is, how sensitive are we to those? For example, do we have populations that are especially vulnerable to heat waves because they live in uninsulated houses, they don't have air conditioning, they have health conditions that predispose them to being impacted by hot temperatures, right? And so that's looking around the county at where those vulnerabilities might be. Oh, this is where there's homes that are less insulated. This is where there are people who are older or have health issues that can cause them to be at risk for heat waves and so forth. And then the final thing is looking at our adaptive capacity. So this is looking at what are the capacities of the county to respond to climate change. So this is really a big topic, and I could probably do maybe another time we'll do a presentation on the climate vulnerability assessment. But please check out the webpage if you're interested and look at those reports, and shoot us an email if you'd like to be on a list for further communication as we continue this process of doing climate vulnerability assessment.
Yeah.
Was that the question? Was it just the CVA, or was there another question as part of that?
That was the only question for that one. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Tracy,
good.
do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just as Josh said, that erie.gov/sustainability, there is a site where you can put your email address in, and we can update you on all of the items that we're working on that we're looking for the community to respond to, or to have information on. So that would be great. It goes directly to me, and I'll add you to the list, and we'll be able to give you all the updates.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Next, we have a comment. I had no idea we continued with our climate change mitigations. Good for us.
We have a lot of work to do. This is going to be a life's work for a lot of people.
Yes, it is great though. Thank you.
Next we have, is the compost available to the public?
It is not right now. Not to say that won't happen in the future, but as of right now, we are. It's not even compost yet. So it has been in operation most of this year, but it takes a long time for it to actually be usable compost. And they're going to start that program with our own buildings. But there are many hopes to expand this program, like I said, to different towns and potentially residents or businesses. Kind of the sky's the limit on the compost there. We have to wait until we're able to get to that point where we can start offering it outside of just our own operations.
But can I just say how cool this is? We have a Republican sheriff who is his department's coming up with ideas for this, and then working with the county government to implement this. The inmates' food waste is now being diverted and being used to make compost. The compost is going to be used to avoid us buying compost, right? So we're saving money in the process. There's also a horticulture program at the Alden Correctional Facility, which I believe some of that compost will be used for. So, using inmate labor. So, there's like a lot of positive aspects of this. I think I'm not very involved in it, so this is more patting the back to Tracy, but it's a really cool project.
No, it is, Josh. You made a really good point that, even on the Green Team, we have the Green Team representatives were appointed by the county executive, but we asked the departments that were not part of the county executive's elected groups. So the sheriffs, the legislature, the clerks. There's representatives on the green team that they didn't always play in the same sandbox. We have this group of really cohesive people, and they don't normally work together well. Maybe not well, but they don't always work together. So we're working on things, outside of who's got jurisdiction over who's got jurisdiction. It's just, we're all here for the same reason, and it's working really well. So it's great.
That's
okay.
really wonderful to hear. We have one more, if that's okay. It's on the idea of compost, and maybe a neat idea in general. Are local restaurants encouraged to contribute to the county food scrap compost pile? Are there incentives for those small businesses to help them recover from the devastating year?
Yeah. Tracy, is it okay if I take this?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so as of now, we're not doing community level composting. There's other parts of the country that do that. It's definitely an ambition of ours to have, curbside compost, or at least for the commercial businesses. And I think that, Tracy, you may be aware of it. I think there are some discussions of pilot projects around that. But right now, unfortunately, that's not something we can offer. And your point is really right, that there is a lot of pain, especially for some business sectors. Entertainment and restaurants and bars and gyms. They've seen a lot of impacts. We are just at the beginning stages of our climate mitigation programs. So those don't have much way to support those businesses. But I think that's a good comment.
It is, and just to kind of go off of that, unfortunately, yeah, for small businesses, there's nothing on the horizon yet. But again, there's nothing to say that it won't happen in the future. I do know that in 2022 there is a state law, I believe at the beginning of 2022, that is coming out, where large generators of food waste are going to need to be diverted from landfill, and so we are working on a program to address that. So when that law comes out, that the very large generators of which we do have some in our community, of food waste, will hopefully be able to go to, if not this composting facility, but a composting facility.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Well, that's all for now.
Well, you guys bore with us through kind of a little bit more of the wonky part of this, where we're talking about the government operations and stuff. The next part is more relatable to yourselves, and it's kind of fun, I think, to at least for a geekier person like me to talk about this. But we're going to talk about your individual. There's a nice web-based tool to do an individual carbon footprint. But I'm going to pull you into one more wonky thing before we go there, just to show that I think it's helpful to look at the perspective of what we as individuals, what our emissions are like, and how they impact things. So I'm going to switch slides, decks real quick. And this chart, let me start with this one. So as we talk about our personal emissions, remember, it doesn't matter what country you're in, right? This shows us what the emission levels are by country. But if we as people, as an individual, as my household, or you and your household, reduce your emissions, you're just supporting this whole planetary thing of reducing everybody's risk. But there really is a big difference between different regions as far as their greenhouse gas emissions. And what you can see is the United States is at the very highest level. We emit about 17 tons per person of greenhouse gas emissions per year. And that's just way higher than other parts of the world. And we can think about this negatively, but another way of looking at this is that there's many countries with a very high standard of living that have much lower emissions. And so there's just a lot of opportunity for us, right? Like this isn't a problem where we have to say, oh, I wish they would do something about it. This is something where we as individuals can do something about it. And so I think that rather than feeling overwhelmed by it, I think we should look at this as, hey, this is something I can do, right? And there's another way of looking at this. This is the exact same data, but now on the x-axis we have population, and the y-axis we have tons, right? And that's where you can see the United States is at about 17 tons. And so you can see that some of the big countries of the world are very low emissions. The average emissions is the red line, which is 5 tons per person per year. But if you look at, if the population of the world is around 8 billion people in 2017, when this is from, about half of the world is under 2 tons per year, and we're at 17, right? So, or 2.5 maybe. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity. I'm going to go back to my other slides. Sorry, folks. Let me get to my right slide back. Okay. So moving forward, our individual footprint, it can really be broken down by travel, home, food, goods, and services. And so first, we're going to do a poll and ask you what you think your biggest source of emissions are. And I just want you to kind of think about these different things you consume and just answer for your own household what you think would be the biggest one. This is partly just I know it's hard to watch a long presentation and just hear people talk and talk and talk. So, you know, give you a second to look at it. Katie, when you think you have a lot of responses, let me know. In the meantime, I'm going to queue up my next thing.
Perfect. I'm going to give it a second here. Okay, if there's anybody else that wants to participate and you haven't already, I'll give you a couple seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to close the poll and release the results. All right, there you go, Josh.
Okay, so what you're seeing is most people were thinking their home. Some people said travel, and one person said services. So let's take a look. So this is the tool. It's the coolclimate.berkeley.edu calculator, and we can post a link to this into the chat. But we can email it afterwards. But this tool lets you put in. You can start by putting in your zip code or your county or your city. What I did was I put in Erie County. As you see, if you type in, it'll help populate. It's pretty easy to use. And then put in how many people live in your home, right? So, you know, I live in a 3-person home. You can put in whatever your salary is. I'm just going to use something let's use something that's kind of close to an average household in Erie County. And as you see, as you change these things, the chart on below will change too. So if you say one person, they have emissions in Erie County of 37 tons per year, but if you have 5 or more, it becomes much higher. And I will tell you that the way this is calculated is different than the way those previous charts were that said 17 tons, because these goods and services and food were not included there in the same way. So this shows more, this includes the things we consume, so it's just higher emissions. So countries like China would show lower emissions there because they don't consume a lot of the things that they produce. A lot of it gets shipped to the United States and we consume it. Anyhow, what you see is that you know, you can just kind of put in some inputs, and the one person who said transportation, they actually win the prize. In Erie County in particular, in New York State, where our electricity emissions are low, vehicles are the highest source of emissions. So let's just go through how we can do our personal greenhouse gas inventory. So you go into this and then you hit the next slide, and here you can choose how many vehicles you have. You can add or subtract vehicles. You can put in the mileage that you drive. You can put in the fuel that you drive, right? So let's say I have one vehicle that gets 30 miles to the gallon. You'll see that reduced my emissions right there. Oh, and I want to go back a step and put in 3 people because that's, okay, so and it's down below is showing our emissions for travel. And so you see we got a smiley face now because I'm only emitting 11 tons for travel, which is better, 29% better than average. So you can see this is a really quick way to kind of get it's not going to be a perfect calculation, but to get a feeling for where your impacts are and also where you can save emissions. So let's go to the next slide. And here we can put in our electric use, right? So you can put in the dollars you spend or the kilowatt hours. So my home, we emit about 5,000 kilowatt hours a year. And so the electricity went down a little bit. And I'm lucky we've got solar panels, so I can say that, you know, we have 100% on solar panels, right? But I'm just going to leave it more normal for now. And then you can choose your utility provider, although if you choose Erie County, it'll only give you NYSEG. It won't give you National Grid, but that doesn't make much difference. You can put in how much gas you use a year, if you use heating oil, square feet of your home, if you want to get to averages for things, and you can change your water use too. And so water actually does have a significant impact. And the water impact is from all the pumping and energy used for purification, and then all on the flip side, all the energy used at the sewage treatment plants to treat the waste that comes from using water. Okay, so the next thing is how much food how do you eat food, right? And so this is something that everybody can change a little bit, or a lot, depending on, you know, what you want to do. But it shows that if you reduce your, I'm not saying get rid of, but if you reduce your meat consumption a little bit, it can have a considerable impact on your overall greenhouse gas inventory. If you go from average amount to a little bit lower, right? Or if you just raise your dairy and lower your meat, that may not help very much because dairy has pretty high impact too, right? So you'd have to think about how you're actually changing things. But if people were to give up, especially it turns out beef, and change from beef to chicken or beef to fish, it has a really big impact on your greenhouse gas inventory. If you click advanced, you can get some more options here too. So this shows some things you can tweak there. And here you can tweak your beef versus your poultry versus your fish, right? If you click the advanced tab. And then the next tab is goods and services. And you can look at the definition for these here. So goods are about items that we consume. Services, of course, are about the biggest impact for services is healthcare that we consume. Some of those you can't avoid. No one's going to stop going to the hospital when they need medical treatment, but there are some things that you can make choices about and change your impact. And then you get to the final slide, and this now shows your overall inventory, right? I get a smiley face because of lower transportation and lower electricity. But I'm still at 42 tons per year, which if you go back to our original slide, it shows that half the planet is under, that would be divided by 3 for 3 people, but half the planet is under 2.5 tons per year. You know, we're still pretty high. There's some things I could do. And so here you can pledge to do something. For example, I could pledge to buy an electric vehicle, and when you click pledge, it'll show that reduction on the chart, and you can kind of get a ballpark for what it would mean to pledge to do an electric vehicle. You can also look at other things, right? I'm going to turn that off so you can see things. But if I telecommute to work, it depends on how far I drive to work, but that could have an impact. I know for my family, that would be a huge impact. You know, if you did some bicycling, you know, all these, you can, if you pledge them, you can tweak what they are. You know, this is saying instead of one of my vehicles, I have a bike and I drive, I get 30 miles per gallon. And so you can dig into the details. Some things, you know, might be things you haven't thought about very much. Like, what happens if I start eating organic food all the time? Does that have a big impact? Organic food. So I'm going to click on that one, and I go up, and you see it does have a reduction, okay? And then, you know, maybe some things that look like they have a big reduction, like, what should we do? I install tankless hot water here. If I do that, boy, it doesn't even show up. It's so small, right? So some things that might seem like good ideas are not. So I hope this is a tool that some of you might want to take and look at. And, you know, again, we have high emissions as Americans, but that's really an opportunity, right? We can have a high standard of living and also really reduce our emissions a lot and really support, you know, a safe planet for future generations. So that's my spiel, and I'm happy to take questions.
I think we have a couple more slides, Josh.
Oh, no. Okay. This is the tool calculator. So you can see that calculator there. And then this shows the community greenhouse gas emissions. So this is the same slide as before, except for instead of internal operations, it shows the community. And what we're seeing is that as a community, our biggest source of emissions is transportation. It's come down just a little bit since 2014. What that means is that even though our vehicles are bigger, with all the fuel efficiency improvements, it's kind of stayed the same. And then what we're seeing is that energy consumption has come down across commercial, residential, and industrial, and that's partly because of improvements to the electric grid. And then how can you get involved? And this shows a whole bunch of things you can do besides just reducing your personal greenhouse gas inventory. You can also do a lot of things that, these are different programs that that we actively have: beach cleanups, household hazardous material events. All of these things are coming out of our department to help improve the environment in Erie County. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Tracy, about that, missing the slides.
All right, thank you. We do have some questions that came in for either of you. The first one that I'm seeing is, can you speak to how wind is impacted by climate change?
Well, there's just a lot of uncertainty about, so wind isn't impacted because, wind moves partly based on temperatures in different places, right? And pressure differentials, and it gets really complicated, and really, I'm not a meteorologist, and I don't have a deep understanding of it. But what the science is telling us is, and what we've seen in recent history, is we're having more severe wind events in Erie County, especially associated with thunderstorms. So we expected that we were going to have more rain events because of climate change. Warmer atmosphere means more moisture gets into the atmosphere, and it increases the potential for precipitation. And we're definitely seeing in the last 10 years an increase in wind events.
I think you can also talk about the increase in just weather events and how they connect to climate change. Yeah, I'm not a meteorologist either, but the increase in storms off the coast, off the Gulf, that come up this way too. I mean, there is some connections to climate change, and those bring in different wind events as well as other events.
The science around hurricane impacts and climate change is really strong. As far as, as you have that warmer ocean and warmer air above it, there's just so much more potential for the science about whether we will have more hurricanes is less certain, but the science around whether we'll have higher impact hurricanes is very strong. But the hurricanes we do have will be very high impact. Of course, we're seeing more occurrence of hurricanes too. And one thing to say is that there's a lot of uncertainty into the future. We know the climate's going to warm, but how that's going to affect us in Erie County, there's a range of possibilities. And that means that, as citizens and as a government, we need to prepare for the worst, right? Like, it's not responsible to say, oh, let's just hope things turn out for the best. We need to figure out what is the worst case scenarios and then make sure we're protecting life and property in our region.
Thank you both. Next thing I'm seeing is a comment. I wonder how much the emissions will be impacted by people staying from home and working from home for so long. It will be interesting to see.
It absolutely will be interesting to see. And if you go into that website, you can look at the climate action and sustainability plan for our internal ops. And like I talked about our commute, some of the action items included telecommuting, and using WebEx type meeting forums. So Josh has put some numbers together from the spring when we were first home, but it will be interesting overall 2020 to see what impact us staying home. I mean, look at the global though. I talked about this in some of my other meetings. It's when the pandemic hit and we were all home, it was so interesting to me to see the articles that came out and the news stories that came out about how things cleared up with us staying inside. Kind of, it's not to say anything good about a pandemic, but searching for any silver lining. They're talking about the waters in Italy clearing, or in Venice clearing, and smog clearing, and so there is something to be said for that.
Yeah, we certainly wouldn't wish,
No.
The impact on our businesses has been really, and there's a lot of people who are really hurting because of this. But it's kind of it's important for us to look at what is the impact, and the impact has been, with less people driving, there's a lot less air quality impacts. There's all kinds of things that have the planet has, you know,
Right.
had a little sigh of relief. So, yeah, we can go on.
Okay, thank you. Next question I'm seeing is, how do you find how many kilowatt hours of electricity you're using per year?
Yeah, so this is an easy one. Well, I think it's easy. You can look at your electric bill, and I thought about putting in slides showing where you would dig that out. But on your electric bill, there'll be a chart that shows, it's like a bar chart, and it'll show kilowatt hours per month over the last month. And so you could add those up, or if you want to do something a little, this might be easier, is you can log on to the website for National Grid, at least. I'm a National Grid customer, so I can't speak to NYSEG. But on their site, you can click, one of the options is you can see what your last 2 years of electric use were. Actually, we'll compare them by month, and you can just add it up right there, and you can see what your electric use is. The same thing for natural gas. If you pull up a natural gas bill, I believe it'll show the trailing 12 months, but you can certainly get it from the website pretty easily.
Okay, thank you. Next, what is Sweden doing as a nation to have their impact so low?
Tracy, is it okay if I take this one?
Go ahead.
The reason I'm going to take it is because I was lucky in a previous life. I did some work in Finland, and that there's similar countries, and I got to travel there. And I'll just tell you, as an American who spent a few weeks in Finland once, it was a little bit mind-blowing how, first off, their transportation system is so different, right? There was not a road that didn't have protected bike lanes everywhere. In the center of town, bicycle paths would go underneath the street and come back the other side. They would actually meet underneath. So you didn't have to cross the street to stay in bicycle paths in some areas. The center of town had pedestrian malls with there would be 1,000 bicycles in them. And we're talking about a place that is colder weather than here, right? And the place I was in Finland. And Sweden is very similar. The Scandinavian countries have a real emphasis on that, and it makes them healthier, right? They're out in the winter. If they're not on their bicycles, they're on their cross-country skis, and they're using these bike paths year-round, and that's how they get to work. It does change how their communities look to some extent, right? They haven't developed the kind of sprawl we have, where everybody's further and further out, living in big homes with big lots. They live more compactly, and then they have many people have very simple cottages on lakes outside of the city that they go to in the summer for recreation. So they'll live in a smaller space in the city or in the town, or in a suburb that's close in, but has good transportation into the city. And then they'll have a place that they can get to that's inexpensive, but is on a lake or a creek somewhere to get away from it all, right? But also there's the investment in public transportation, the investment, the building structures. They've had very strong building codes for a long time, so they've kept things, as they build buildings, they're very insulated and they are high efficiency. They've worked very hard to have their utility grid be low impact. So they're more unified. There's less disinformation there and less partisanship and divide around this issue there than there is in some parts of the United States, right? So it's been maybe easier for them to take action, but they've been working on it a long time. But I think we should look at it as sort of leading the way. There's a lot of things they've done that we can adopt, and it obviously has made a huge difference.
Thank you, Josh. Next question, how can we reduce phantom power drains on our household?
So phantom power drains are like little devices that might be drawing energy that you don't even think about, right? So, when you leave your computer plugged in, you turn it off, but it's still consuming a little bit of energy waiting for you to press the power button, because it's not a hard switch, it's a power button. And so, these add up. A lot of them are very small. So a cell phone charger can be a phantom power drain. They'll use the most important thing for phantom power drains is that most people are not going to go around unplugging their computers and their cell phone chargers every time they stop using their cell phone. I mean, we can encourage that, but the most important thing is that we have strong energy requirements, like the Federal Energy Star program, that mandate that when manufacturers make these devices, they're made in as smart up way as possible, and so those phantom drains are minimized. And I, for example, at one time researched cell phone chargers, and the cell phone chargers we were using a decade ago, when cell phones were newer, had much higher drains when you weren't using them. So, you know, your cell phone charger was always using a couple watts. If you would touch it, it'd be a little bit warm. The cell phone chargers that come out today, because the Department of Energy has strong guidelines, use much less energy, and so are much better for the environment. And so probably the most important thing we can do is support and advocate for the Department of Energy to do a good job on Energy Star and on Energy Star type requirements for all of our devices in our homes. You know, if they just come out.
What about our small appliances though? Is there an impact because I do tend to unplug like my toaster oven because it's older. I don't have a newer Energy Star toaster oven. I use it often, but if I unplug it, am I stopping this phantom energy?
Well, it matters if it has a computer that's always running, waiting for you to press an on button, then maybe. If it's a mechanical toaster oven where you have a mechanical switch, it probably doesn't matter.
That's good to know.
Yeah, but the biggest things are probably not the phantom loads. The biggest things in your household are things like your refrigerator, any kind of electric heating you might do, anything that feels warm when you touch it. A space heater that you put under your desk at work it's just really high impact as far as electric use. And it's very expensive on your pocket.
Interesting.
That's a great question.
Well,
wait, I wasn't responsive enough, and I'll get in trouble if I don't say this. There are really smart things you can do about phantom loads. For example, there's power strips that you could have that can turn off a whole set of loads all at once, that sometimes can be on timers, or you can put things on mechanical timers. Sometimes those are better than that. There are next generation things that can reduce, that you can take action and invest in. You might want to look at them closely though, because there might be other ways you can spend your money that would have bigger impact. It just depends.
Thank you, Josh. So actually our next comment is a class on being energy efficient would be great.
And that's funny because you suggested, Katie, that maybe for the spring we do an energy efficiency class. And if we did that, Tracy and I were talking that we would definitely want to bring in the county's energy development director, Reed Brayman, because separate from his role working on energy at the county, he also, more than anyone I know at the county, he is walking his talk, right? He drives an electric car. He just replaced the furnace in his house with a heat pump furnace. Yeah, we certainly, there's a lot to do as far as energy. If you go back to the footprint, the three biggest things really are food. So, we talked about things you can do as far as what you eat, but transportation and household, right? So transportation, it's reducing travel. It's trying to double up trips. It's carpooling, all those kinds of things, bicycling. With household, really we start getting into energy efficiency. And first off, hire a good business, come in and do an energy audit of your home. There's all kinds of energy savings you can do, both on the building shell to keep cold air from coming in, but also with your appliances. Even things you wouldn't think about, like tuning your oven so that it is more efficient and has less carbon dioxide emissions, will make you healthier, but also will have you use less gas. Having your furnace or boiler tuned every year is a great thing to do. Going around and weather stripping things has much more impact than you would imagine. And the ideal thing to do is when the auditor comes to your home, install a blower door in the door. That's what the auditor will do. They'll put a big fan in your door and suck air out of your house, and then they'll go around and test to see where the air is coming in at. When they do that, make sure you're there with them and walk around with them. Make them take you around and see where all those gaps are that are causing air to come in. And then you have a roadmap for, you might hire it out, but you can also do stuff yourself to, I need to put some weather stripping on this window, or I need to put some caulk around this or that, right? Those little things actually have a big impact, and they make us more comfortable too. They make our homes nicer to live in. So yeah, we could definitely do an energy efficiency class, and we bring in Reed if we did that. Sorry to make the answer so long.
No, that's okay. Tracy, anything to add?
No, I think that a spring energy seminar would be great.
Okay, awesome. Well, now I'm just seeing a couple thank yous. So Tracy, Josh, thank you so much for your time, for everything you're doing for the county with your projects, and everyone who's on, thank you. Once this program generates, I will post it to YouTube. I'll send everybody here an email with the link to the video and then also the link to that emissions tracker as well. So everyone enjoy your day. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.